It's an absolutely absurd day in the world of Magic the Gathering. Wizards of the Coast has just admitted digital defeat. On top of that, there's the insane gold-plated Planeswalker scam. And that's not even all the crazy news we have to talk about today.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The magic historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, my friends. I hope the day finds you well because we have gathered for a big fat installment of Mega Magic News, and it is ultra ginormous. I have an entire page of news items to discuss, from small to huge. So, in no particular order, diving in from the top, first item on the list, AI grossness. What do I mean by that? Well, there was an interview recently with the dude in charge of Hasbro, and he said some very disconcerting things, specifically in regards to AI. He started out by talking about they do these different experiments every couple of months to bring in AI because it is effective and cost-saving with games like Monopoly and other properties. Now, if that's all they were doing, sure, fine, whatever. But in that same interview, specifically went on to talk about how deep a well they have in terms of D&D and Magic the Gathering to be exploited by AI. So, I don't know exactly when it's coming, but that is clearly canary in the coal mine style stuff where they're already seeing success with it and eyeing what they can do with their other properties. So we'll see where it goes from there. I, for one, want to see people working on Magic in card design and art. I don't want to see it turned into like, Robo has made you a new card. No, Robo, hit the road. I don't want nothing to do with you. Now, let's move on to something I do want to have something to do with, the oversized insane dungeon. Feast your eyes on this dungeon, my friends. This thing is about the size of a printer page because that's how much space it takes to keep all the abilities on the cards. What is this? Well, there is going to be a mega special celebration event that is happening in May that uses these gigantic dungeons. It is a celebratory Baldur's Gate Dungeons and Dragons event to celebrate D&D being around for 50 years. So each store is sent 4 copies of this dungeon, and the idea is you play commander games using this actual dungeon to adventure into. And the dungeon does start out kind of weak, right? It's fun that it has a bunch of Baldur's Gate flavor to it because it's based on the Baldur's Gate wilderness, right? So if you've played either D&D or even just the video game, probably going to get a kick out of it. But what really gives me a kick is the power level of the last couple lines of the card. So I just wanted to talk about that part of it. When you look at Circus of the Last Days, you move into it, you get to create a token that's a copy of one of your commanders, except it's not legendary. Boom! Have an extra copy of Commander. Or the Undercity Ruins. Create 3 4/1 black skeleton tokens. Like, what? And they have Menace on top of it. And that's not even the ultimate level. When you get to the ultimate level, it gets insane. Steel Watch Foundry gives you an emblem that gives all you guys +2/+2 and trample for the rest of the game. Answer's Sanctum lets you reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You put all of them into your hand, and all your opponents lose life equal to the casting cost of all those cards combined. And then you have the Temple of Baal. Creatures your opponents control get -5/-5 until end of turn. I love the insanely powerful nature of the end of this dungeon. It really does make you feel like you're getting a great reward. And I like events like this where it's straight up, come on out, have a good time. It's literally just celebrating stuff we already enjoy. This is an absolute win as an event. Literally the only downside I can think of at all to this is the fact that it's limited to North America. So my American friends and my Canadian friends, we all get to enjoy it. But if you're anywhere else in the world, you can't go to this event. But I will clue you in. You can actually go to the WPN website if you're sneaky, and you can download yourself a copy of the dungeon. So while you can't play in the event, you can totally print out your own copy and play your own event with it. it. So you're not going to be completely left out in the cold. And as an added note, in case anybody's wondering, this dungeon absolutely is not a tournament legal dungeon. You can't use it unless you're playing in casual games where people have agreed that's what you're going to do, all right? So that is a really, really cool thing that they're doing. Now, next item on the list is there is a secret arena event that's going on where Wizards of the Coast is sending out little clues each week. Answer the clue, you get a little prize. But if you do every single one of the clues, then you get entry into a special secret arena event. And I think that's actually a lot of fun. So I thought that I would toss that in as some good news. Speaking of other good news, if you like Universes Beyond and you like Brandon Sanderson, Wizards of the Coast has actually been in talks with him about doing a Cosmere-based Universes Beyond. Now, apparently once they started working on the Marvel and other things, it did get put on the back burner, so there's no telling exactly when it's going to be coming down the line. But ultimately, we could be looking at Universe Beyond Magic cards that have the direct involvement of Brandon Sanderson. And if you didn't know this, Sanderson actually wrote a story for Magic the Gathering. He said, I will write you a story if you give me creative control over the story. And as a result of them agreeing to do it, the story Children of the Nameless was created, and it is great. It's quality writing by a quality writer getting to tell the story the way he wants to. So I am super, super stoked about this idea. Now, what I'm not super stoked about is the Golden Planeswalker scam action. So let's talk about this ripoff now. My friends, Wizards of the Coast is doing this bizarre thing where they have the Littlest Walker secret lair. And actually, since we're talking about that, there's another item on the list that I'm going to roll in right here. Wizards of the Coast has a ton of extra copies of the Littlest Planeswalker secret lair, the newest iteration that was sold through Hasbro Pulse. And they're doing something a little bit weird with it in that they're offloading it through regular distributors. So by that I mean LGSs are being given the option to buy up these Littlest Walker secret lairs, but these layers are terrible. They're not something that most stores are going to want to buy. There's no value to it. Plus, the whole, it's new is way past. So Wizards is just basically trying to move dead stock to retailers because of it. I don't know how many are getting in on it, but that's a side note for the Littlest Walkers. Forget them as a secret lair as cards and start thinking about secret lair as something that has no magic cards in it, because this is secret lair Littlest Walker, but they have minifigures, okay? So they come in these little like blind boxes, but what they're doing is they're selling a set of 5 of them for $150 US, technically $149.99, right? $150 for 5 blind boxes. But by buying all 5 together, you get all 5 different figures. All you get is a little 4-inch plastic figure and then a lenticular, check out the art kind of card that goes in there. Whoop-de-doo. And you like it's insane. They want $30 a pop for these, and they're trying to turn it into like this super gamble. First of all, you have to buy all 5 together, but they're trying to turn it into a super gamble where 1 out of every 20 of these will have a gold-plated Planeswalker. Like it's not even worth the price with a gold-plated Planeswalker included, let alone without it. I mean, I've been to places like Hot Topic and other locations where they sell blind boxes, and I, for one, absolutely am a huge fan of blind boxes. They trigger that same kind of, what am I going to get, that booster packs do. So I'm not against blind boxes, but I am against mega ripoff scams, which is at $150. Get out of here. It's so disconnected from reality, right? So we covered the Hasbro Pulse offload. What's next? The awful, ugly Chandra. It's perfect, actually. This ties into miniatures. You know what? Let's start with how it's supposed to look. WizKids made a Chandra figure, all right? This is how she's supposed to look. Not too bad. Pretty standardized looking Chandra. We've seen her before like this, even in some card art. Now, why am I bringing it up? Because this is what she actually looks like. Here's a side-by-side of the back and the front. This is, and also, I want you to notice up at the top where it says premium painted. Like, I love the fact that this is premium painted. When you look at it, it's nightmarish. And if you're wondering how this happens, it's because companies take advantage of workers overseas and pay them like a penny to do this work. And those workers have to paint a bajillion of these things all in one go. If you've ever seen footage of these factory workers and the way they are milked, it's brutal. Companies coming along and just going, hey, we're going to charge crazy prices for this, and we're going to pay you basically nothing. And then we're going to call it premium painted. And what I love the most is somebody took the actual Chandra card and put the figure in the card art, and it really shows the absolute absurdity of it. When you see it separated from the packaging just on the card, I love this so much. It's pure ridiculousness, right? Now, let's talk about something really cool. Let's talk about this crazy Heroes of the Multiverse card that they made called Svega, the Unconventional. So, if you're not familiar with these Heroes cards, here's how it works. Wizards of the Coast makes them as a reward for their internal employees. So a lot of these cards are printed to maybe a dozen at most copies. In some cases, there's only 3 or 4. It depends on how many people there are in the department the card was made for. 3 people in the department, they make 3 copies. These are some of the scarcest Magic cards on Earth. And whenever they go up for sale, which is super rare, they tend to fetch tens of thousands of dollars. So, Svega here is the newest one. 1 blue, 1 white, 1 green, and 1 for a 3 loyalty planeswalker that has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a loyalty counter on target planeswalker. -2 for each planeswalker type among planeswalkers you control. Create a -1/-1 attendee creature token that's all colors. If you don't know what it means when it says planeswalker type, just think planeswalker name. So it'll say Chandra, it'll say a Johnny, whatever it is, that's what it's referencing. So essentially, for each different unique planeswalker, you can't count 2 Sarkans, you can only count Sarkhan once. But for each unique planeswalker you have out, you get to make a 1/1 token. And then its ultimate ability is -X, choose an Elspeth, Teferi, Liliana, Chandra, or Garruk planeswalker card name with mana value X. Create a copy of the card with the chosen name. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. You know what? I wish that the white one was a Johnny instead of Elspeth. It just feels better for me, but ultimately, that's a very, very minor quibble with the planeswalkers they've chosen there. And it says, Svega can be your commander. So what's going on with this? Well, this is the reward card that's based around working on conventions. You can see it in the name. First of all, the unconventional. Also in the name, Svega is literally just Vegas. That's it. It's just Vegas rearranged for the Vegas con, right? Now, when it comes to the abilities, it makes perfect sense that they're all planeswalker focused because we're all planeswalkers. So it makes perfect sense. On top of that, the attendee part, that is people attending the convention. I enjoy that on another level. And the artwork is a fun nod to conventions as well, because when you look at it, you can tell that essentially what they're doing is they're showing a cosplayer up on the main stage. If you look in real close, you can actually see that Svega's helmet has a little side piece on the one that extends in front of her mouth the same way that a microphone would. So this is absolutely an attempt to give a nod to conventions, and this is given to people who worked specifically on that. I love the Heroes of the Realms card because 1, it's a great way to reward the employees. 2, I think it's a lot of fun the way they build the flavor of them and finding all the connections and underlying. So this is a pretty sweet card, and from a player perspective, not from a player, but from an actual gameplay perspective, bro, every time a land comes out, you get to put a counter on any planeswalker. That's really strong. -2, you get to make a bunch of 1/1s to block for your dudes if you need to, but the -X is the craziest because you can pick any version of these planeswalkers. You don't pick the first printing, you can pick any different printing, and you make a token copy essentially, right? Like, it's not technically called a token, so the copy might actually count as a real card. The Heroes of the Realms get really weird and out there, but I thought that would be fun to take a look at. Before we end off with the digital despair. Wizards admitting digital failure. This is specifically talking about Magic Spellslinger. Some of you may remember it from previous iterations. The game has been around for a few years, but it's genuinely languished hardcore. If you've never seen it, what Wizards was trying to do was compete with Hearthstone, mostly, it feels like. I played the game, and while it has the names of Magic people in it in terms of the Planeswalkers, and it has the names of Magic cards, it really didn't feel like playing Magic in any way. You put these weird little tiles down on the board based on, like, you don't use mana, essentially. You just have like an ever increasing resources where each turn you're allowed to play something more expensive, and you put these little tokens down on the board that fight each other but don't heal up unless they changed it. And ultimately the game was so buggy when I tried to play it before. What was it called? Athrio? They had some kind of different name for it that I can no longer remember. Maybe it was named after like an arena or something like that, a specific one. But either way, I don't remember the initial name of the game, but I played it when it had its first name, and the game was so buggy that it kept locking up on my phone. The only thing that worked properly was the store. You would go into the store and there would be no bugs. So basically, like, this game has been sitting in idle. There's been no updates to it since March of last year. Like, sure, it's some very minor updates, but no real major updates. They did a complete overhaul of the game at some point after I stopped playing, but ultimately it didn't seem to make any changes, because looking at everything, it still looked like the same game to me, and all the problems still were persisting. So at this point, what they're doing is they've already shut down the cash store. You're not allowed to buy anything that way. They are keeping the game up until June 4th, at which point it's all completely down. Now, if you happen to be somebody who played Spellslingers, you might not know that Wizards of the Coast is actually giving 1,500 arena gems to anybody who is a Spellslinger player who wants to move on over to arena or is already an arena player. So 1,500 gems, that's like 2 free drafts. That's nothing to sneeze at. And if you are in the boat of somebody who did play the game and you want to get that, all you got to do is make sure that you've linked your Spellslinger account up to Wizards of the Coast's like actual arena account. Those two have to be connected, and that's all you have to do. And then later on, near the very end of March, they're going to dump the gems into your account automatically. So this is no surprise. Every video game that Wizards of the Coast has tried to make that isn't specifically playing Magic the Gathering has failed miserably. And when you look at newer games like Marvel Snap, which has just been dominating, right? Wizards of the Coast can't get their feet under them. And I think part of that is just the straight up arrogance of the company. They believe that since they're Magic the Gathering, that companies should be willing to work for them for less. They shouldn't have to pay as much. And that sort of elitism actually totally did bleed into Arena. When Arena was originally created, you can tell the developers themselves, who weren't originally Wizards of the Coast employees, had been indoctrinated with this, well, we're Magic and we're worth a lot, so you're lucky you even get to work on this. People are lucky they even get to play it. And of course it's going to cost more. That kind of arrogance. So when you looked at the prices in the cash store for this game, they were completely out of whack. They had microtransactions for $150 to $200, but the gameplay wasn't nearly solid enough to actually ask for that. And the game wasn't properly being handled. Remember that Diablo game they tried to make where it was generic? And the cool part about it was we got to see a bunch of Magic worlds and actually wander around them, but the gameplay was so lame and repetitive. And all the abilities they had, they named after Magic spells, didn't feel like Magic spells. Everybody was interchangeable and generic because Wizards, they seem incapable at this point of doing anything new and creative. They're literally just, we want a Diablo. Make us a Diablo. Why isn't it working? Because you didn't put the time or money into it. No, we don't accept that. And the exact same thing has happened here with Spellslingers, right? Wizards of the Coast can pull it off with things, or Hasbro, I should say, can pull it off with stuff like Monopoly Go, but not with Magic the Gathering. The only thing they seem to be able to get working at all is Arena. And that's only a half measure, right? They have a lot of people who are unhappy with Arena, and Arena hasn't become the big thing they thought it was going to be, where they could bring everybody in and we'll have it all. They'll buy the paper cards. They'll play Arena. Wizards really doesn't know what they're doing when it comes to the digital world. But you know, once upon a time, They were really good at doing one thing, focusing on making magic. And on that note, last night, I did a historical look at the entire Zendikar block. We're talking about the actual backstory of the set. All of that is a deep dive and opening boosters from all 3 of the sets in the block. So if you want to hear the progression of how Zendikar started out as a plane where people were exploring, looking for treasure, and then woke up what they thought were angry gods that turned out to be the Eldrazi, and then Zendikar itself rises up to fight back, that is an epic storyline from the old days. I will leave a link to the archive where I've put up the stream of me going through all those packs and talking about Magic's history. So if you want some full-on old times, good times, head over there for that. That's all I have to say today, my friends. Thanks for coming by and hanging out. I'll do a live stream over on my Hatcher channel tonight. Put the stream archive. I'll put the stream afterwards on the archive. Yeah, that's how we'll do it. So, big shout out to my patrons. Thank you very much for supporting my channel. Just tap the mic. I don't know if you guys can hear that. Anyways, I gotta get out of here before everything falls apart. See you next time.